Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me. So let's just give another 1 or 2 minutes for more people to come in. All right, it's about time. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ran. I'm the food and drink sector lead of the China Britain Business Council, CBBC, and I'm based in Beijing. So, yeah, this webinar today is all about not new, three updates of a key food and drink labeling requirements. As we all know, the labeling requirements in China can be tricky and changes apply constantly. And then, although the three major updates are not going to happen this year, but rather March 2027, sorry, we think it's important to just keep you updated on what's going to happen. So majority of the changes will be about labeling and then requirements on content, raw material claims and functional claims. So today we have the honor to invite our member and then also long-term partner in compliance, a company called Reach, or they also go by the name CamLinked. I trust some of you might know the name or might have worked with the company. So we will open up for questions and answers, but for some more complicated questions, well, we prefer to get back to you after the presentation, as these changes are quite new and then they're not in place yet. So, and then in the end of this today's program, we'll introduce to you our program for the FHC, Food and Hospitality China, in November. If you are visiting the market, November will be a good time. And then our partner, FDEA, also have a delegation to come to the show to Shanghai in November. So without further delay, let me introduce you to CamLinked. Sadie, can you maybe turn on your camera?
Hello,
Yeah,
Ren.
Sadie is the food regulatory analyst of Reach24, and she is based in Hangzhou. So Sadie, would you want to introduce yourself a little bit and just kick off with your presentation?
Okay, now, so I'm gonna share the presentation.
Sorry, please wait a minute. Sorry, please wait a minute. There's some technical issues.
Okay. Okay. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Zadie.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Sadie Shen, a regulatory analyst at ChemLinked. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you today. Well, in March, China released 3 major reformative standards and regulations related to food labeling. These include GB 7718 2025, GB 28050 2025, and the administrative measures for the supervision of food labeling. These changes mark a significant step in China's food labeling system and regulatory landscape. Here's today's outline. First, I'll walk you through the key changes in GB 7718 2025 and what they mean for food labeling in China. Second, we'll take a look at new administrative measures for supervision of food labeling and break down the most important updates. Finally, I'll explain the major changes in GB 28050 2025 and how they compare to the previous version. Let's start with an overview of the regulatory changes. All these new standards or regulations will officially take effect on March 16, 2027. Now, looking at GB 7718 2025, this is China's mandatory national standard called the General Standard for the Labeling of Prepackaged Foods, which lays out the core labeling requirements in China. It applies to all prepackaged food labels, whether sold directly to consumers or not. Some detailed rules, like font size requirements, are moved to the new administrative measures for supervision of food labeling for better coordination. These 2 documents, GB 7718 and the administrative measures, are designed to work together to manage food labeling more effectively. Next, we have GB 28050 2025, which covers nutrition labeling for prepackaged foods. This standard focuses on how nutritional information is shown on labels. However, it does not apply to health foods or prepackaged foods made for special dietary uses. Then let's dive into comparison and interpretation of the changes in GB 7718 2025. In the updated GB 7718 2025, the definition of prepackaged food has been explained. Previously, under GB 7718 2011, prepackaged food referred to items that are prepackaged with a uniform indication of mass or volume within a certain quantity range. Now, the new definition also includes food that is prepackaged or made in packaging materials or containers for sale by measurement. This addition fills a regulatory gap in labeling standards. It helps ensure the effective delivery of labeling information and enhances the protection of nutrition and food safety. This broader definition allows labeling rules to better cover real-world sales scenarios. Under GB 7718 2025, allergen labeling will become a mandatory requirement for allergenic substances that are directly added as ingredients. This marks a shift from the previous version where allergen labeling was only recommended. However, in cases where allergens may be introduced indirectly during processing, such as through shared equipment or production lines, labeling remains voluntary. The regulation continues to list 8 major allergen categories: gluten-containing cereals, crustaceans, fish, eggs, peanuts, soybeans, milk and dairy products, and tree nuts. Well, it's important to note that while other countries may define allergens differently, for example, including sesame or mustard, companies targeting the Chinese market must ensure compliance with these 8 categories recognized under China's regulatory system. The updated standard provides 2 acceptable methods for declaring allergens. First, allergens can be emphasized within the ingredient list by using bold or underlined text. For example, if wheat or peanuts are used, the label may highlight them within an ingredient list to draw attention. Second, a separate allergen statement can be placed near the ingredient list. This could be phrased as allergen information or simply stated as contains egg, peanut, and dairy, depending on the manufacturer's format. The regulation also outlines several exemptions. For instance, allergen labeling is not required for certain highly processed ingredients where allergenic proteins have been removed, such as refined soybean oil. Overall, these changes aim to improve the clarity and effectiveness of allergen information on food labels and enhance consumer safety, especially for individuals with food allergies. Next, let's take a look at the changes to date marking requirements under GB 7718/2025. One of the key updates is that the date format must now follow a strict year, month, day order. Other formats such as day, month, year, which are commonly used in other countries, are no longer permitted. So for companies exporting to China, it is important to follow the Chinese format, even if it's different from local conventions. An example of the correct format is shown on the slide. Another important change relates to products with a shelf life of 6 months or more. For these products, the production date is no longer mandatory. Instead, manufacturers may choose to indicate only the shelf life and the expiration date, as long as the information is clear and follows the required format. There is also a provision for products with a maximum packaging surface area of 20 square centimeters or less. In these cases, the same rule applies. It's acceptable to indicate only the shelf life and the expiration date. So overall, the updated rules aim to improve clarity for consumers while also giving manufacturers more labeling flexibility, especially for long shelf life or small size products. Another notable update in GB 7718/2025 is the introduction and promotion of digital labels such as QR codes. While this is not a mandatory requirement, the regulation encouraged food producers to use digital labels as a supplementary method to present food labeling information, provided that the physical label itself remains fully compliant with the standard requirements under GB 7718. Well, if a digital label is used, its presence must be clearly indicated on the physical label using terms like digital label or other similar wording so that consumers know how to look for it. As long as the digital content complies with labeling regulations, producers are allowed to use digital labels to display more detailed product information beyond what's feasible on limited packaging space. When scanned, the first level page must present the information in a clear and readable format. This includes text, audio, video, or a combination, but it must not contain any elements that interfere with the user's ability to understand the content. This approach helps balance the need for transparent food information with the growing complexity of product labeling. It also aligns with China's broader goal of modernizing food labeling practices to keep up with technological trends and changing consumer expectations. Now let's move on to the regulation of food claims, especially those related to no, free from, and not added. In recent years, there's been growing consumer concerns and discussion in China about food additives. While many people understand that additives are necessary for food production, they still associate them with potential health risks. As a result, a lot of companies began using phrases like "no additive used" to highlight product purity or freshness. However, these claims often caused confusion as different companies use different definitions. For example, one might label a soy sauce as "no additive used," while another describes a BBQ sausage as "no artificial preservatives added. These aren't always consistent, and that inconsistency can mislead consumers. To address this, GB 7718/2025 introduces stricter rules. Only ingredients or components that are truly zero in content may be labeled with phrases like no or free from. For additives, contaminants, or substances that are already not allowed to be added to certain foods, companies are not allowed to make claims like no or free from. And most importantly, phrases like not added or not used and other wording with similar meaning are prohibited altogether under the new regulation. So overall, the goal is to ensure that food labeling is truthful, standardized, and not misleading, especially when it comes to claims that might influence consumer perception of food safety or quality. Next, let's take a look at the updated requirements for ingredient labeling in GB 7718/2025. Under the previous standard, GB 7718/2011, if an ingredient was mentioned in the food name but wasn't specifically emphasized on the label, there was no requirement to indicate its actual content. However, under GB 7718/2025, this has changed. Now, if an ingredient or component is mentioned in the food name, its added amount or content must be indicated on the label. That said, the regulation also provides clear exemptions where the content does not need to be listed. For instance, when the ingredient is mentioned solely due to allergen warnings or other cautionary statements, the quantity is not required to be indicated. Now, let's also briefly cover the new labeling rules for microbial strains. If a microbial strain is directly added during food production and has not been inactivated or removed, it must be labeled by its specific name. You may also choose to indicate its strain number and content. If the strain is used for fermentation, it can be described as a fermentation strain or microbial fermenting agent. However, if the strain has been inactivated, for example, through filtration, labeling is not mandatory. But if it is labeled, the inactivation process must be clearly stated near the product name or ingredient list using terms like inactivated, non-viable strain, or pasteurized. These changes aim to improve ingredient transparency and give consumers more accurate information about what's actually in the product and in what quantity. Let's now turn to a major update in GB 7718/2025, the new chapter dedicated to imported food labeling. First, all visible labeling content on imported prepackaged foods must strictly comply with Chinese laws, regulations, food safety standards. In terms of foreign languages used on packaging, the new standard introduces a more regulated approach. Any foreign language text or traditional Chinese characters appearing on the label must be fully aligned with the simplified Chinese version of mandatory information. This ensures that Chinese consumers receive consistent and accurate label details. There are, however, a few exceptions. Trademarks, the name and address of the food producer, the foreign operator, and the websites are not required to follow this rule and may retain their original form. Another major update concerns country or region of origin labeling. When a product involves multiple countries or regions, the origin should be declared based on the location where the final substantial transformation occurs. In other words, where the product undergoes its last major manufacturing step. If a separate country is responsible only for filling or repackaging, that must also be clearly labeled alongside the actual origin. In addition, the origin of raw materials or ingredients is voluntary to be indicated if relevant or beneficial for consumers' transparency. Then let's move on to check the key changes in the administrative measures for supervision of food labeling. First, let's look at the specific labeling requirements for the production date and expiration date as outlined in the administrative measures for the supervision of food labeling. As I mentioned earlier, detailed labeling rules like font size are no longer part of GB 7718 and are now clearly defined in the administrative measures. One of the key updates is that the labeling requirements for production and expiration dates have been strengthened. Under the new rules, the height of the text for the production date and expiry date must be at least 3 millimeters. This is a clear increase compared to the previous GB 7718/2011 requirement of 1.8 millimeters for general mandatory information. For small packages with a maximum surface area of less than 35 centimeters squares, the minimum text height is set at 2 millimeters. In addition, the date must be printed in a clearly defined area of the packaging. If this area is not located on the main display panel, then the main panel must provide a clear direction, such as see specific part of the package to guide consumers to the correct location. To ensure visibility, the regulation also specifies the color contrast. The production and expiration dates must be printed in black text on a white background with another high contrast color combination that makes the information easy to read. This is intended to prevent consumer confusion and to ensure the durability and legibility of key safety information. Let's now take a look at the updated information on font size requirements for prepackaged food labels. Under GB 7718/2011, the minimum height for mandatory labeling text, symbols, and numbers was 1.8 millimeters, while the maximum surface area exceeded 35 centimeter squares. The new administrative measures keep the 1.8 millimeters minimum, but introduce stricter and more detailed requirements based on the package size. For packages with a maximum surface area over 150 centimeter squares, the minimum height increases to 2 millimeters, and for those larger than 400 centimeter squares, the minimum height must be 2.5 millimeters. This size requirement applies to all mandatory labeling elements, excluding the nutrition facts panel. In addition to size, the proportion of font height to width must not exceed a ratio of 3. This is to make sure that text doesn't appear too narrow or compressed, helping maintain clear legibility. The regulation also emphasizes that all text, numbers, symbols, and patterns must contrast clearly with the background color. This ensures that mandatory information can be easily read under typical lighting and shelf conditions. Now let's take a look at the naming rules for food products. Food name should indicate the true nature of the food's properties. First, this is especially important for animal-derived ingredients. If the name highlights a specific type of meat, that meat must be the primal raw material. For example, if a product is called beef dumplings, beef must be the main ingredient by weight. If the name mentions only one type of meat, then all raw materials must come exclusively from that source. For example, if something is labeled lamb sausage, it cannot contain pork or beef. It must be 100% lamb. If the name lists multiple types of meat, they must be listed in the name in descending order by proportion. Product containing more pork than chicken must be labeled as pork and chicken meatballs, not the other way around. Then, for plant-based products that imitate animal-based foods, the name must include clear terms like imitation vegetarian or indicate a plant source. For example, a soy-based product that mimics chicken should be labeled imitation chicken made from soy. Lastly, if a food doesn't contain a certain ingredient but mimics its flavor, and the name reflects that, it must use words like flavored or with flavor taste. For example, a chip that tastes like barbecue must contain no meat and must be labeled BBQ flavored chips, not BBQ barbecue chips. These rules aim to avoid misleading names and ensure that consumers can clearly understand what's in the product just from the name. Under the administrative measures, the scope of prohibited labeling content is now more clearly defined. Food labels must not explicitly or implicitly suggest any disease prevention or treatment functions. This applies to all food products. Additionally, for products other than registered health foods, labels must not make any claims about health benefits. Take the examples shown on the slide. A product named as slimming polypeptide protein claims to boost immunity and delay aging. These are health-related functions and cannot be used unless the product is a registered health food. Another one, multivitamin fruit and vegetable tablets, claims it can reduce blood lipids and prevent cardiovascular disease. This clearly falls under disease prevention claims, which are strictly prohibited for food products. These kinds of terms are not allowed because they mislead consumers into thinking the product has therapeutic or functional effects that it legally cannot claim. Now let's continue with the content that's prohibited on food labels. First, food labels must not include any descriptions that are deceptive, false, exaggerated, or misleading. That means you can't overstate the function of the product, exaggerate its quality, or mislead consumers in any way about what the product really is. Second, labels must not claim that the product is specially supplied or exclusively supplied to government bodies or monetary organizations. For example, terms like internal supply only or military use are not allowed. These kinds of phrases give us false signs of exclusivity or privilege, which violates labeling rules. And third, any language that promotes feudal substitutions, goes against scientific understanding, or violates public order and good customs is also prohibited. So you can't make claims that rely on substitution or use culturally inappropriate or offensive wording just to sell a product. These restrictions are all about making sure food labels stay truthful, respectful, and science-based, so consumers are not misled or manipulated. When food is sold via the internet, manufacturers and operators are required to display key labeling information directly on the main sales page, not just somewhere hidden in details. This includes the product name, net content, ingredients or ingredient list, shelf life, product standard code, which is not required for imported food, storage conditions, the name and address of the producer, and if it's a special food, any registration of a filing info. One important point to note, all of this information except for dynamic details like the production date or expiry date must match exactly with what's printed on the physical product label. That ensures that consumers browsing online are getting the same information they would if they picked up the item in store. Finally, let's take a look at the comparison and interpretation of the key changes in GB 28050/2025. Let's start with one of the most notable updates in GB 28050/2025, the expansion of monetary labeling components. Well, in the previous version, GB 28050/2011, the requirements followed a 1+4 structure. This included energy, protein, fat, carbohydrate, and sodium. The 2025 revision upgrades this to a 1+6 format by adding saturated fat and sugar as compulsory items. Saturated fat and sugar have long been associated with non-communicable diseases such as obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular conditions. By explicitly requiring them on food labels, the updated standard aims to give consumers clearer, more complete information. For instance, when comparing two snack products, one might now notice a significantly higher sugar content, something that would have been hidden under the old format. This empowers consumers to make more health-conscious decisions at a glance. These additions mark a significant shift toward more transparent and health-driven labeling practice under GB 28050/2025. Another important addition in GB 28050/2025 is the introduction of a mandatory warning statement. All prepackaged food labels must now include a warning: children and adolescents should avoid excessive intake of salt, oil, and sugar. This message must be placed directly beneath the nutrition facts label. The regulation allows some flexibility in presentation. It can be aligned to the left, center, or right, and it may be enclosed within a box or displayed without one. This change underscores the government's commitment to public health, particularly for younger populations. High intake of salt, oil, and sugar during childhood has been linked to early onset of chronic diseases and long-term health complications. By placing this warning directly under the nutrition label, the regulation ensures higher visibility and greater impact, prompting both consumers and caregivers to make more conscious dietary choices. It also reflects a broader shift toward using food labeling not only for transparency, but as a directed tool for health education intervention. Now let's take a look at the changes in optional labeling components under the 2025 version. 4 new nutrients have been added to the list of optional labeling items. N3 polyunsaturated fatty acids, also known as omega-3 fatty acids, alpha-linolenic acid, EPA, or DHA. These components are often associated with cardiovascular and brain health, making them increasingly relevant to health-conscious consumers. All 4 nutrients are expressed in milligrams with a rounding interval of 1 milligrams. The regulation also defines thresholds for when these values can be labeled as 0. Specifically for N3 polyunsaturated fatty acids, the 0 value applies when the content is less than or equal to 20 milligrams per 100 grams or 100 milliliters. For alpha-linolenic acid, EPA, and DHA, the threshold is less than or equal to 5 milligrams per 100 grams or 100 milliliters. This addition not only broadens the range of nutrients companies can highlight, but also supports clearly labeling of products enriched with omega-3s. This slide summarizes the key updates in content claims, particularly focusing on fat and omega-3 fatty acids under the 2025 version. Let's start with fat-related claims. Under GB 28050/2011, the scheme claim was defined for liquid milk and yogurt with fat content required to be no more than 0.5%, and for milk powder, no more than 1.5%. These criteria were limited strictly to dairy products. In GB 28050/2025, the regulation changes the restriction conditions by clarifying that other dairy products making similar fat content claims must comply with corresponding national food safety standards, rather than being restricted to just milk or yogurt. This provides a clearer, more flexible framework for labeling fat contents across a wider range of dairy products. Next, the standard introduces new content claims related to N3 polyunsaturated fatty acids, the omega-3s. 2 levels of claims are defined, including source of or contains N3 polyunsaturated fatty acids, and high in or rich in N3 unsaturated fatty acids. These claims were not included in the 2011 version, so they present a new opportunity for products that are fortified with or naturally rich in omega-3s. Moving on to comparative claims. GB 28050 2025 introduces several important adjustments compared to the 2011 version. First, under GB 28050/2011, a wide range of comparative claims was permitted, including terms like reduced energy, increased or reduced protein, reduced cholesterol, reduced sugar, and more. These claims were allowed as long as the reference food was from the same or similar category and familiar to consumers. In GB 28050/2025, the regulation introduces a new comparative claim, reduced saturated fat. This claim can now be made if the product contains at least 25% less saturated fat compared to the reference food. To standardize the basis of comparison, the standard also defines two specific types of reference data sources. First, nutritional content of same category or same type foods from the same enterprise. Second, nutritional content from the China Food Composition Table for the same food category. This helps ensure that comparisons are both relevant and scientifically grounded. At the same time, the updated regulation removes several comparative claims under the 2011 version. These include reduced protein, reduced dietary fiber, reduced vitamin, reduced mineral, reduced cholesterol, and increased or reduced carbohydrate. The removal of these claims likely reflects an effort to reduce potential consumer confusion and to focus only on comparisons that are nutritionally meaningful and well supported by evidence. Now let's take a look at key updates regarding nutrient effect claims at GB 28050/2025. To prevent confusion with health food claims, what were previously referred to as function claims in GB 28050/2011 are now officially renamed as effect claims. This change clarifies that these statements refer to the general physiological roles of nutrients, not health effects. One major update is the addition of several warnings type effect claims for nutrients like fat, sugar, and sodium. These are intended to raise consumer awareness about the potential health risks associated with long-term excessive intake. For example, for sugar, new claim has been added, such as long-term high sugar intake may increase the risk of dental caries and obesity. For sodium, the 2011 version stated excessive sodium intake is harmful for health. This has been revised to prolonged high salt intake can lead to increased blood pressure. Well, this slide summarizes the updated nutrient reference values in GB 28050/2025, which have been revised based on the latest edition of the dietary reference intakes for Chinese residents. Several key changes have been made to reflect the most current understanding of nutritional needs. For instance, cholesterol, the NRV of not more than 300 milligrams has been removed entirely, aligning with global trends that no longer set a specific daily intake limit, but rather focus on overall dietary patterns. Next, let's look at the revised permissible tolerance ranges for nutrition labeling under GB 28050/2025. Most of the changes center on vitamin A, vitamin D, and sugar. Vitamin A and vitamin D, this is a key revision. Previously, these vitamins had to fall within 80% to 120% of the labeled value. Under the new standard, the upper limit is removed and only the minimum of 80% remains. Sugar limited to lactose. Previously, the content had to be at least 80% of the labeled amount. In the 2025 version, That shifts to a maximum of 120%. This reverses focus, placing more importance on not exceeding the declared amount. But to improve consumer engagement with nutrition information, GB 28050/2025 introduces more flexible and diversified expression forms that enterprises can use to supplement traditional nutrition labeling. The goal is to make sure the information easier to understand and more relatable, especially for general consumers who may not be familiar with technical nutrition terms. When labeling energy, it is now permitted to use familiar terms like calorie, kcal, or calorie to replace or supplement the kilojoule expression. For sodium, the word salt can be used. This is especially helpful since many consumers are not more familiar with salt as a concept, even though it's technically sodium that is regulated. Similarly, for fat, the terms oil or fat can be used depending on what is more recognizable or contextually appropriate for the product. In addition to wording, visual elements are now encouraged. Labels can include graphics, icons, or other visual aids to help communicate nutrition information more clearly. The Food Pagoda graphic and key recommended items from the Chinese dietary guidelines can be used to highlight the balanced nutrition messages. This kind of labeling flexibility is designed to bridge this gap between technical standards and everyday understanding, promoting healthier consumer choices through more intuitive communication. So that's the end of this part. Now let's introduce the ChemLink platform. While the ChemLink platform is widely recognized, many clients may not be aware that our parent company is Rich24 Edge Group, an international consulting firm specializing in global market access solutions for the chemicals, consumer goods, and the agrochemical industries. Within the food sector, we offer comprehensive compliance services spanning the entire value chain, including ingredient formulation reviews, local label creation or auditing, assistance with local food registration, and customized reporting and early warning services. Leveraging our international expert network and strong collaboration with regulatory authorities, we provide end-to-end compliance support for food industry claims, enabling them to navigate complex regulatory landscape efficiently. Here we would like to highlight our labeling services, which extend globally beyond China, covering regions such as the US, EU, Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and South Korea. Our offerings include customized label risk assessment, reviewing existing labels to help business avoid compliance risks, early warning services, monitoring market labeling violations in real time, and delivering tailored improvement recommendations to enterprises, regulatory training, providing customized new regulation interpretation, training based on enterprises' needs to enhance overall compliance awareness. Should you have any requirements, please feel free to contact us at any time. Finally, we are proud to showcase our esteemed clientele in the food industry, which includes renowned domestic and international food enterprises, many of which are Fortune Global 500 companies. Our efficient and high-quality services have earned the trust and acclaim of clients worldwide. That's all about this session. Thank you for watching.
Thank you, Sadie.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before we open up for questions, let me briefly introduce you the opportunity to participate in the FHC later in November this year. To make it bigger. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so I believe most of us have been to this show. So Food and Hospitality China, FHC, is one of the two most prominent and important food and drink trade shows in China. So this year the FDEA and PSA will be again hosting a delegation of food and drink companies to visit Shanghai in November. And then around the show, we have a program for you to sign up and join if you want to expand your opportunities when you're traveling in the market. So basically, it starts from the Monday, which means that you probably need to arrive in Shanghai on the Sunday. And we have a food and drink market briefing on Sunday morning. And then, sorry, on Monday morning. And then the following, that's a typo. It should be Tuesday, 11th November. We have a store visit in the morning. And then I don't know why it all says Monday, but that's actually the Wednesday. We have lunch with selected Chinese buyers, and then we have a additional Meet the Buyer program where we will arrange 3 bespoke buyers meetings for you and at the British Center in Shanghai. So that will be the FHC program in November. If you're interested, feel free to get in touch with me or Antonetta on the UK side. And just to remind everybody, we do also offer a GACC registration, manufacturer's registration service. So if you do have the need, also feel free to contact us. So that's it for the content sharing. If I can ask if anyone has any questions. We have a question, Sadie, from Daniel from Narene's. Do we need shelf life and production date or just one or the other? So shelf life and production date. I think we have a few other companies also having the same questions.
Well, regarding the shelf life and production date, well, under the new GB standard, GB 771 2025, the production date and expiration date will be mandatory, well, instead of the previous production date and shelf life. And there is exemptions for production date in 2 cases, which when shelf life is over 6 months. So in that case, only shelf life and expiration date are required. And in the case of when packaging, when the area of packaging is less than 20 centimeter squares, only shelf life and expiration dates are required. I hope that are helpful for answering that question.
Yeah, thank you. And another question from Daniel: for free-from products that are called gluten-free in EU, does this new rule mean it must be 0 gluten to calorie called gluten-free? So let me.
Well,
yeah.
Well, these free from or these similar claims have to follow the specific standard in the GB standards like GB 28050. So it may not be this requirement, but for more detailed specifications, I probably need to refer to the specific details. So, but that's what I can answer in this stage.
Yeah, I'll answer the next one. Will we receive a recording? Yes, we'll be sharing the presentation and the recording of the session. So the presentation should have Camlink or Reach24's contact details. So if you have more questions, you can reach out to the team. Any more questions about the updates from this session? We have a question from Gary. Can you clarify how Chinese authorities enforce labeling regulations, especially in relation to products arriving at ports and airports? So how these rules are reinforced?
Well, the labeling standards must be clearly followed. And while these may be the samples are solicited randomly, and while if uncompliance occurs, that the your products found to be in compliance with the labeling regulations, in that case, your products may face recalls, rejection, and something like that. And for more detailed detailed interpretation of the enforcing rules, I think I might need to more detailed reference of the regulations. And if you would like if you're interested in that, I would like to get it back to you if you contact us in contact@comlink.com. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's more of a random checks. It's not every time and every batch, but if the GACC do decide to check a certain batch and then they realize there's discrepancy, there might be penalties to you, to the brand owner, and probably to the importer as well, as their name will be also listed on the packaging. A question from Sarah. Our labeling currently takes place in China by our distributor, so it's done in China. Is there any requirement for this labeling to now take place in the UK? Sadie, do you know, or is that included in this updates to shift the kind of labeling process to the manufacturing country?
Let me look at this question. Our labeling currently takes place in China by our distributor. Is there any requirement for this labeling to now take place in the UK? If the labeling requirements takes effect since the 2027, from 2027, all products imported to China and all products sold in China must follow the new rules.
I think this has something to do with, now we still can apply a sticker to the packaging, and the Chinese label is that sticker. So there's been discussions for a long time that this might change. The Chinese government might require the companies to print a bespoke Chinese labeling, not just a sticker. I think this is where Sarah's question comes from. So as far as I understand from your presentation, there's no mentioning about that, right?
I do mention that part simply in the imported food labeling part in the GB 7718 2025. Yes, probably this is highly possible that because the GB 7718 2025 it shows a stricter rules. But when the regulations are not effective now, so we don't know about how it will be implemented, but it is highly possible in that way.
So I think it's similar situation. It's always possible, and it's just not confirmed yet.
Yeah.
All right. Any more questions? All right. If there's no more questions for now, let's wrap up, and as I said, I will be sharing the recording. We'll be sharing the presentation. Do get in touch with ChemLink if you have questions about compliance, not just labeling ingredients. They are specialized in food and drink, and then also cosmetics. So these are their two specialties. All right. So and then if you have any questions about FHC and what we can offer to your company during the trade show, get in touch with us. So thank you, Sadie and Callan. Thank you for your time today, and thank you everyone for joining us this morning. That will be it for the session. Thank you.